said, my name is Drew Courtney. I am a high school ESL resource teacher, and I will let my co-presenter introduce herself.
I'm Elizabeth Rose, and I'm one of the middle school ESL resource teachers.
We've got Lewis Jackson, Kenya McCoy, Darlene Grove, Amy Callisti. They are all our elementary resource teachers. They will be available in the chat with questions that you guys might have.
All right, if we're ready, I will share my screen, Drew, and we can get started.
It's all you guys.
All right.
So, like we said, we are here kind of talk a little bit about the needs for English learners, especially right now since we are in NTI status. But first, I want to kind of get a little bit of conversation going in the chat. And I want people to kind of tell us what you think the top 5 languages are in JCPS. I'll give you like 30 seconds. While you guys are typing, just a little bit about English learners. We have about 150 languages and dialects here in JCPS. And we kind of, if you know a little bit, if you have a second language or know a second language, you can kind of cheat. You kind of can see the top 5 languages here. But our top 5 languages, we've got our Spanish, Arabic, Somali, Nepali, and Swahili. Those are our top 5 languages here in JCPS. Now, how many English learners are in JCPS? As you guys will see here in a second on this little chart that we've got, as you can see, each year we are growing in numbers. So in 2019, we had about 9,000 English learners who tested with Access. And in 2020, now we have 11,000. And then even then, we're probably above, even higher this year as well. We'll have more accurate numbers when we do Access here in 2021. But as you can see, we are a growing population in Jefferson County. Speaking of Access, one thing that you guys might hear a lot is Access. Access is the yearly English language development test that all of our English learners take. And you guys will see that each of them have a composite score. Based on the score, kind of tells you the level that they are at. So we have our entering, emerging, developing, expanding, and then we have bridging and reaching. So anyone with like a 1.0 to a 1.9 is in the entering stage. So if you guys have English learners in your all schools, that's kind of one great tool to look at and see kind of what is their Access score. And then to kind of base it off of this chart here, kind of see where they are in their English development. Now for Kentucky, in order for a student to exit EL status, they need to have a 4.5 on their Access.
And this quote, lower is faster, higher is slower. What that means is just that kids usually progress through those beginning stages of language development much quicker. And then once they get to developing, their progress usually slows down and it takes more time to move on up that little ladder.
Yes, exactly. Another thing that you guys will see that's really important for our English learners is called the Program Service Plan, or you guys might see it as PSP. This is the accommodations plan for all English learners. So on this plan, you guys will see kind of their instructional accommodations, so stuff that you guys should be doing in the classroom for them, as well as the assessment accommodations. So if they take they take MAP testing or any other state testing. These are kind of the accommodations they would need to have. Majority of the time, it's a lot of it's extended time, bilingual dictionary. Some may need oral native language support, readers, or scribes. Your ESL teachers, as well as your counselors, have access to these. So if you're ever curious about what accommodations you should be providing for your English learners, reach out to either one of them, because they are the ones that create these plans. So they will know all the accommodations for all of your English learners.
And Drew, I'm going to jump in and add in, I think sometimes it's a misconception that a PSP is really just a document that you look at for those state testing or district-wide testing, but really this is the document that should be followed with fidelity all year long, right? Like every time a student takes an assessment, they should be getting these accommodations to make the curriculum equitable.
Yes, absolutely. Another great service that we have here in JCPS is we have our own language services department, and they are available to offer interpreters for all of your language needs. There's a couple different ways that you can use it. We have a agreement with what's called Language Line Solutions. That is going to be our over the phone communication that we've got. So there's 3 different ways that you guys can actually access Language Line. You can use your phone, or you can use it from your computer, or there's even an app. And what we've done is we've actually created a nice little one-pager. A huge thanks to Molly Lane, who's one of the middle school resource teachers. She actually created this one-pager. If you all ever need to get in contact with your English learners' families, we recommend using this service because you will be on the phone with an interpreter as you are calling that family. So you actually will be on the line with the interpreter, then they will call the family that you want, and then they will be on the line with you to provide interpretation and translation as you speak with those families. Our language services department also offers over video communication as well. If you go to JCPS's website, just type in language services. Their website's super helpful with trying to arrange to get an interpreter, whether you need one online, like a video conference, or if we ever go back to, when we go back to in person, they are available that they can send interpreters to your schools as well. So if you have events or you need a parent meeting, they are always available to send interpreters for any of your language needs.
And I would just plug in, I've been using Language Line for a long time, but I've always just used this dial-in option. And I was just this year became aware that the app is an option. So if you are a tried and true Language Line user, I would highly recommend downloading this app because it is so much easier than actually dialing in the number. It's even easier than it used to be.
I agree. I always called as well. So I didn't even know there was a mobile version as well as a computer version of this as well. But it is great. It is so great to have the interpreter on the phone with you while you are talking because it's very instant interpretation and instant translations, and they're very helpful there at that company.
Okay, so we have kind of gone through a quick overview of some logistics for ELs. And now we're going to go through some social emotional scaffolds and then some instructional scaffolds for ways that we can support the ELs sitting in our classroom, specifically in an NTI setting. So I'm going to start going through these social emotional scaffolds. We're going to talk about the importance of names, culturally diverse libraries, and building background knowledge. So I love this quote here. Mutilating someone's name is a tiny act of bigotry. Whether you intend to or not, what you are communicating is this: your name is different, foreign, weird. It's not worth my time to get it right. So obviously when we have ELs sitting in our rooms, their names can be a challenge, but it is so powerful to take the time to get their names right. So up here, you guys have access to these slides. So this is actually a link. I'm not going to click on it right now, just because of time, but it will take you to a website where you can type in a student's name and then hear it pronounced for you so you can practice it and get it right. This is one really easy way to lower the affective filter. That is our goal really for all of our students, is to make them feel safe and welcome, and simply pronouncing someone's name the right way is a great first step. I will also add that we're going to be sharing a Wakelet with you all, and that's another way that you can access all of the materials we're going to talk about today. So name tents. Name tents are a tried and true strategy that we've been using in classrooms, kindergarten through 12th grade. You have the kids fold a piece of paper, write their name on it, maybe put a few things that they want to share about themselves. But in an NTI setting, obviously, that complicates it. So one option is to create name slides. So Molly Lang, again, has created this beautiful example of a slide that she used in summer school. And this just is an easy way on a collaborative slideshow presentation. You can have your students create their name tent in a digital manner. Excuse me. Culturally diverse classroom libraries. So something you may or may not have heard before when you're considering text is to think about mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. Obviously, our students don't have access to our physical classroom libraries right now. So as I'm going through this, I want you to think about your text selection during NTI and think outside of just, a book that students hold in their hands. So when you think of books as mirrors, you want to think of books that students see themselves in. So they have characters that look like them, sound like them, live in neighborhoods like them. They can see themselves in the text. A window is a text that gives a student kind of a peek into another world. They can see what it's like for other people, realize that people live different lives than them. And then third is a sliding glass door. And this is a magical kind of text that transports students into another person's shoes. So they really get the full experience of what it's like to live as someone different. So building a diverse set of text is a really easy way to, again, make our students feel welcome, make them feel like they fit into our classrooms. And building background knowledge. So one thing that you hear a lot in ESL PD is what's good for ELs is good for all students. So these are not strategies that are tailored just for ELs. These are just strategies you can use in your classroom that are going to benefit every student in your room. So when we activate background knowledge, it gets our students on the path to building new knowledge. So 4 really easy strategies that can be applied K through 12. You can use a KWL chart. So this is just a pre-learning strategy in the K column where students generate what they already know about a topic. The W is to get them thinking. They can be asking questions and recording them. That can be done before a lesson starts or even as a thinking tool as a lesson is happening. And then L is a reflection tool where students just reflect on what they've learned, maybe how their thinking has changed, what questions have been answered, anything that they want to remember. And this could be easy to set up. Digitally, you could use Jamboards to set this up. You can do this in Google Slides. An easy strategy to transfer to the digital world. Anticipation guides are a tool that can be used as a pre-reading strategy where students just mark their opinion on a set of statements. And then after learning, they go back and reevaluate. Has their thinking changed? Has their thinking stayed the same? This just makes sure that our students are processing their learning and really thinking through the effects of the text that they're experiencing. Multimedia. So videos, music, images, visuals are a great way to support all student learning, but especially for ELs, it helps them bridge the gap between their native language and the target language. If we can provide a picture, it supports so much. And then finally, making connections. So we want students to be connecting with our content, whether they're connecting to a personal experience, to something they've seen in the media, to something they've read in another book. The more connections we can make, the deeper their learning can go. Sorry, I feel like I'm flying through this, but 30 minutes is not long.
So now we kind of want to look at some of the instructional scaffolds that we can provide for our English learners. And really, we're going to focus on kind of 3 big ones. We're going to look at scaffolding student responses, how to incorporate visuals and organizers, just like how Elizabeth said, visuals are a great tool with English learners. So we're going to see how we can incorporate them. And then also the big thing that we need to be mindful of is that interaction. So we need to provide interaction opportunities for our English learners as well. So for the first one, with scaffolding responses, what we kind of need to think about is when we scaffold a response, we can't just give our students, and this really applies with any student, we can't just give our student a lengthy assignment and just say, okay, here's your assignment, now go. Especially for our English learners, they can get very overwhelmed with the language needs that are in that assignment, especially the complexity and a lot of the vocabulary that they will need to know. So instead of just giving a lengthy assignment to a student, we kind of suggest breaking it up into chunks. So kind of break it down to more complex tasks, but at the end, kind of have an end goal in mind for that task as well. So that can be some things like maybe having some graphics, then maybe having an organizer, then providing some sentence frames or sentence starters or paragraph starters for your students. So as an example, if we're kind of looking at, like, let's say we're doing a lesson over the seasons, we might start with kind of maybe looking at a visual about kind of why do we have different seasons around the world? We might watch a video about the seasons. Then from there, we want to build on that. We want to build off of one another and then increase in complexity with that. So then maybe we might create a graphic organizer about what season is it during which month. Then at the end, we might say, okay, now we're going to have you write about what you've learned. We might start off with maybe a sentence starter with, like, there are changes in the seasons because. So when you scaffold, you want to make sure that you are kind of chunking things up, but then each of those chunks builds on each other throughout the lesson. And some examples we mentioned a lot about sentence frames and sentence starters. Basically, these are great tools just to get, especially with our English learners, just to get them started with kind of their thinking. If we can start off the sentence by, I think that, then our English learners can kind of have some time to process their thoughts and they kind of know exactly what they need to respond with. So they might come in the form of sentence frames where you kind of have the sentence constructed for them, but you take parts out and then your students might fill in those parts. You could do sentence starters. This is especially good if you're trying to get their opinion about something. You can say, I think that, or in my opinion, and then your student will continue with their thought. Or you might even have, and this is if you want them to write like an essay response, you might have paragraph frames. So that way your students can kind of see how your essay should be structured. So they will know kind of like, first we need to start with this. A second reason is this, finally, et cetera, et cetera. So they kind of have a format they can look for and just a way for them to kind of take their ideas and it's something visual for them to see, okay, here's how I'm going to construct my essay.
And like I mentioned before, we're going to be sharing a Wakelet with you guys. And there are 3 different resources that give you tons of examples of sentence frames and sentence starters and paragraph frames that you can use in your classroom. And I think one thing that's really important to remember is that these are not tools, these are tools that let us assess students' content knowledge. So it kind of takes away the language challenge because we're providing a frame that students can plug in what they know about content. So they're a great assessment tool to use in content area classrooms.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot, especially on the Wakelet. We have a lot of especially sentence starters for different ideas. So if you want to, like the one we have up here as an example, expressing an opinion, there is some websites that we posted that kind of give you ideas of some great sentence starters or sentence frames that you can use with your kids.
Andrew, I'm going to go back. I think it's important for us to look at when we're thinking about scaffolding lessons that we are trying to amplify the content. So like looking at this graphic, if the end goal is that students are building a house, we're not changing the task or changing the end product. We're just breaking it up into digestible chunks that allow our students to be successful. So I think it's important to remember that we're not asking you to water down your content. We're just asking you to break it down to make it more manageable for our ELs, right?
Yeah, one of the best quotes I think I've ever heard is amplify, not simplify.
I
And
love
that's
that.
what we're doing. We don't want to water down our lessons for our English learners. We want to amplify them up. We are just giving them different means of producing that.
Exactly. Okay.
So the other instructional scaffold that we can use is visuals. And visuals can come in a variety of different types. One of the things that we like to include is a lot of anchor charts. Now, if we were in person, these would be great. These can be posted around the room. So that way students could see kind of the processes or what they need to do. If you have something that you want them to use, you can create an anchor chart. So that way the students know if they're struggling, they have something visually they can look at that they can say, okay, this is how I break this problem down, or this is how I need to focus like my personal narrative on. Another great visual is just actual visual vocabulary. So we include pictures of our vocabulary that we're trying to show. Like I believe that this example on here kind of looks at force and motion. So a lot of times our English learners will need kind of a visual representation of what that would look like. And another one that's great too is realia. So when you bring in stuff to your classroom, I love, especially over online right now, if you're having Google Meets with your kids, bring in some props, bring in some things to show them some of the stuff in action that you have around your house. If you're trying to say, this is what a rolling pin looks like. So kind of use some of those props that you have to really enhance the vocabulary for our English learners and for any student.
Something really interesting that we had an awesome PD the other day with Carol Salva, who's like an ESL goddess. And because in my head, I'm thinking, how do we use anchor charts in an NTI setting? And it was almost like she had taken a screenshot or created like a small digital anchor chart that she could then paste into a Google Doc or paste onto a Google slide so that, on a student's assignment, if your student's writing a personal narrative, you could just stick that little picture right in there, and then they can be looking at your anchor chart.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then the very last thing that we want to kind of go over with instructional scaffolds is just those interaction opportunities. We, especially with our English learners, the only way that we can learn English or learn a language is by using it. So we need to provide those opportunities for our students to be practicing the language. So a couple of things that we can kind of think about when we want to include incorporating some interaction is if we look at like TPR, or total physical response, where kids do the motions or the actions of it. But then this could be a great way to for them to practice because they are doing and saying at the same time. Another great way to kind of incorporate some interaction is by student collaboration. If you're having like Google Meets for NTI, let your students talk. Just kind of post like something like maybe just like a funny like question of the day, and just have your students just interact with each other. And then maybe if you want to do like breakout rooms, kind of get them to talk with one another as well. And then the very last thing we want to kind of think about too is we need to have those academic conversations also. There's a few ways that we can do that. And we're actually going to show you on the next slide one great way that you can have an academic conversation. But we also need to know too that our kids need to also be using the academic vocabulary as well. So make sure that we are structuring those conversations that incorporate some of that academic vocabulary and those academic words that we want our students to use as well.
And sorry, Drew, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to add, this would be a great time to come back to those sentence frames. So we want low stakes for our students so that they feel comfortable practicing their language. So if we can provide them with a sentence frame and tell them how to structure their conversation, that makes it a lot more accessible and a lot less intimidating. All right, are we ready for the next one, Drew?
Yes. So speaking of academic conversations, I think one of the best strategies, and I've used this a ton when I was in the classroom with all of my high school students, it's a strategy called QTripleS, which it stands for question, signal, stem, share, and assess. So basically what you would do as a teacher is you would ask a question based on whatever it is, whatever concept or whatever idea that you want them to think about. Then, without any of the kids talking, have your kids kind of think about what they want to say. And then they're going to give you a signal, whether it's give me a thumbs up, put your hand on the desk, put your pencil up, It might look a little different now we're in NTI settings, of course, but just give them the time to think, then give them a signal when they have their answer. Then provide a stem so a sentence starter for your students to think about with their response. Then have your students share with each other. So using that stem, using what they've thought about, have them share with someone around them, and then at the end, assess. So this kind of makes the students feel a little bit more prepared instead of just like on the spot, like, what do you think? It gives them time to think about it. You provide a sentence stem for them to kind of think about their response. They got a chance to practice with their fellow students. So then by the end, when you ask them, hey, what do you think about this idea? I've lost my word. They had some time to think about and process their answer before they share it out with everyone. It's a great way to have academic conversations as well, because you are wanting them to use some of that vocabulary and those ideas in their responses.
And Drew, I know you said that you had done this in high school. My background is in elementary school and middle school, and I've also used this strategy in both of those settings, and it's super effective. I think a couple important things to point out are when you get to this signal, you can preface it with the students. If you say, okay, give me a thumbs up when you have an answer, I'm not going to call on you yet. So you're trying to lower those stakes and let kids know, I want you thinking, I want you to tell me when you're ready, but you don't have to answer yet. Because then they're going to get an opportunity down here to share, check their answers with someone else before you're calling on someone to assess.
Yes, exactly. It gives them more time to really then sit and plan out kind of what they want to say without feeling stressed or feeling overwhelmed that they have to think of something right on the spot.
It's a great strategy for all kids, not just ELs. I mean, I personally like to feel prepared before I have to answer in front of a group of people.
I do as well. So it is great and a lot of these strategies that we've talked about, these could be good with all students as well. So a lot of these are just kind of great practices that we can be doing with any student. Of course, our background is with our English learners, but again, a lot of these strategies you can use with all of your students.
Definitely.
All right, so the very last thing, we want to thank you guys so much for coming and tuning in to our little presentation. Like we said, we've included a wakelet with a lot more additional information about some of the stuff that we've talked about here. So if you are interested in kind of learning some sentence stems or some ideas about visuals, etc., we have provided with you guys a wakelet that we've just shared a bunch of links and a bunch of resources. There's also the PDF about using language line. So if that's something that you would like to share with your schools or you use yourself, please feel free to go on there. It's a PDF that goes over all the directions that you need to use your language line.